Hi, I'm Chris Krebs, Director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at the Department of Homeland Security. It's great to be speaking to you today. First, I'd like to thank Joseph and GrayHat for having me. And when I look at the agenda, it's pretty cool to be on the same roster as Mudge and Ning Wang, just some real stars in the InfoSec community. One thing I'd like to point out, though, before I get into this, both Joseph and Mudge spent some time working in the federal government. We also have brought recently in some folks from the InfoSec community to help build out our roster. Josh Corman is just one of those. And we're going to continue building out the team, trying to increase and improve the partnerships and the interactions between the security research community and the federal government. So more to come there, but check us out, cisa.gov/careers. All right, now into the content. So I'm going to talk to you about a few things today. First is the trusted relationships that we're trying to build here at CISA, and in part who we are. And then I'm going to move into a practical application of the things that we do here and that trust building that we work on so hard here at CISA in a discrete application of election security. I want to note, though, that I'm coming to you from the past. We're taping this from when you're viewing it a couple weeks ago. Now, in cybersecurity and InfoSec, things can change on a dime. Things can change and happen very quickly. So what I'm telling you right now is based on what I know today, October 14th. My hope is that nothing happens, that it's a pretty boring couple weeks. But hey, I am, a bit on the paranoid. Okay, so CISA, who are we? Well, we are a federal civilian agency. That means we're not in the intelligence community, and we're not in the Department of Defense. We're not law enforcement. We're a civilian agency that really thrives on public-private partnerships. What does that mean? That means that we have to work with you in the private sector, in the security research community, in the state and local government space, in the federal space, to help build an understanding of what the risks we face across any number of threat and vulnerability spaces and potential consequences. And we have to build initiatives and programs that help drive that risk down. And we have to do it collaboratively. Part of what we do is work to understand what it is that you're concerned about. And then we build those programs together. We can bring intelligence, we can bring other understanding that we have, and we offer that to you and put you in a position to best manage the risk that you're responsible for. So in a sense, we're the nation's risk manager, or I'm sorry, actually more appropriately, the nation's risk advisor. You're the ones that manage the risk. We advise on how to best manage that risk. Over the last few years, because we're coming up on our second birthday, we've really focused on becoming a customer-centric organization. And really more than anything, that just means figuring out what our demand signal is from our stakeholder base. Again, you, and then providing some sort of value to you to help address the things that you're concerned about. Everything we do is voluntary. So I have to understand what it is you need and provide my services. And again, I'll talk about that in the context of elections and how we've supported those efforts. But regardless of what it is, in this public-private partnership space, everything is centered on trust. If you don't trust me, if you don't trust CISA, then you're not going to work with us. If I don't trust you, then we're going to have a hard time understanding what it is that you need and then building our programs around it. So again, everything we do here is about trust. It's about building a big tent and having all the relevant parties come together and manage this risk. All right, so let's get into a little discussion about election security. Let me start with the threat landscape and the things we're seeing out there, and then I'll talk about the things that we've been doing over the last several years and this progress and the successes we've had. And I'll close out with what you, the last line of defense in American democracy, are able to do. So on the threat landscape, I think back to 2016. Think back to what seemed to have come out of left field or out of the blue was this Russian effort to interfere with our elections, with our way of life, with our democracy. And it manifested along three different primary lines of attack. First was attempts to interfere with election infrastructure. Those are the systems that we all interact with and election officials at the state and local level use to actually facilitate an election. The second was these hack and leak campaigns against political operatives, the campaigns themselves, and then release information to damage a candidate or change the way we think about things. And then lastly was just this broader disinformation effort that's really never stopped to really get into our heads. So one side, you've got technical hacking. This is more of a psychological hacking. It's a perception hack. It's getting inside of our brains, amplifying issues beyond what we may otherwise think of them, and get us to both change the way we view the world, but ultimately undermine our confidence in us, who we are as Americans, who we are in the democratic processes and institutions that underpin our way of life. We here at CISA are responsible for supporting that first line of attack or countering that first line of attack, the election infrastructure. So in 2016, we saw a range of actors in the Russian intelligence and military services space try to get into a number of different state systems. The way we look at it, they scanned, they researched all 50 states. They did have some success in penetrating a voter registration database in Illinois, and they were able to access a handful of systems in some counties in Florida. The access they had, though, was limited in their ability to change a vote, a single vote, manipulate the count was non-existent. And we remain pretty confident that that holds true, that they're not in a position, they're not able to change a single vote in American democracy. As we look now, what we're seeing across the threat landscape, we're informed by two or three different perspectives. First is our intelligence community is always out there. The intelligence community between the NSA, CIA, the FBI, and others are always out there looking to see and spot those who might do us harm, stop them where they are, and help inform the network defenders back here so they can harden their systems. We also have an improved visibility over the state networks that support elections, all 50 states, so that if there is any sort of anomalous activity, that we're able to detect it, we can alert on it, we can investigate, and we can stop it. Is that the relationships we have now with state and local election officials is so informative and so robust that when they see things, they report to us early, often, and late. So the position we're in is incredibly advanced as opposed to where we were in 2016. And so the scope and scale of the 2016 activities was far and away much more active than where we are today. Based on those three lines of reporting that we have here today, we're not seeing anything that we can really attribute to a focused, targeted activity or campaign against our election activity. That's not to say, though, that there's not activity that we're seeing every day. And what we see is what you see from where you sit, whether you've got a honeypot deployed or whatever it is. You see that there are actors out there across the internet that are scanning on a regular basis, looking for vulnerabilities, looking for open RDP or other ports that they can exploit, and then move within the network, grab the domain controller, and do whatever they want. That's true of federal government agency networks. That's true of state and locals, the private sector, so on and so on. You see it every day, you know what's happening. And within that, we are seeing a range of actors, nation state and criminals, that are looking to exploit whatever not just the latest vulnerability, but some of those significant vulnerabilities that have been announced over the last year or so. They're chaining them together, they're compromising networks, and in a limited case or so, we have seen some compromises, non-targeted compromises of election systems. Again, I'm coming to you from October 14, 2020. My hope is that that remains true. But we've got to anticipate that there will be successful compromises, that they will be in a position within an election network. And that's what's informed our activities over the last couple of years. And so let me move into that space now. What have we been doing over the last 3.5 years to prepare for the 2020 election? If you look right here, protect 2020. That's been our mantra here at CISA and working with the state and local governments across the country, as well as our interagency partners now for 3.5 years. We have been working to build a vibrant, a robust election security community of practice. So back in 2016, where a random county CISO or a state CISO or a state election official may have felt as if they were on their own trying to defend against the GRU, now they've got 49 other states standing shoulder to shoulder with them. They've got us at CISA, they've got the intelligence community, law enforcement, Department of Defense, the Election Assistance Commission. Everybody's pulled together within a tight-knit group to defend democracy, to protect 2020. We've set up an election infrastructure ISAC, all 50 states and thousands of jurisdictions. In 2016, there wasn't an ISAC. We pulled that together in 2018 and got all 50 states over a matter of months. It was the fastest growing ISAC. Now look, I know ISACs aren't the silver bullet, but to be able to pull this community together where we can share information on the latest trends in spear phishing or brute force or whatever credential-based attacks there are, we can get that out as broadly as possible across the community. These are great, great things. The second thing we've really been focused on is improving the cybersecurity of the networks. Now, state and locals, whether you're in elections, in the tax department, or wherever you are in a state and local government, you know that there are going to be challenges. Revenue streams are going to be down because of COVID. That means tax dollars are going to be down. That means that capital investments in state and local networks is going to be down. So it's going to take that community-based approach, that collective-based approach to pull this thing together, to get everybody the information and the resources they need. Congress has stepped up over the last 3.5 or so years. They've provided $1.2 billion in grant funding to states. Now that's spread out across all 50 states, and some of the resource demands are pretty significant, but we're seeing improvement. So back to that threat conversation we just had, and these relationships that we've been building over the last several years, we've spent a big focus over, since last summer, in fact, on discussing and raising awareness of the threat of ransomware. Ransomware is probably something that you don't love dealing with because in a lot of cases, it's crapware. But other cases, it's pretty sophisticated. And, I know my hunt analysts see it. I know when I talk to threat intelligence companies, sometimes it's a lot more fun, a lot cooler to be hunting for Russian, Chinese, Iranian, or other actors. But you know what? The average American, the community out there, sees, feels, and is impacted by ransomware every single day. Regardless of the sector, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's health and public patient care, state and local governments, education. So in the DC area, right as schools were reopening, Fairfax County, one of the largest counties in the area, got hit with a ransomware attack. So it's not just our businesses, but it's our kids, it's our way of life. Ransomware is, as I see it, the closest thing to a global crisis, of course, next to the pandemic and COVID that we're in right now. And they're related because of this shift towards remote work, because of this digital transformation. The bad guys aren't waiting. They're looking at this new attack surface and they're looking how to exploit it. So again, we took this ransomware conversation and took it to the states. We took it to our local election officials. And we educated, we improved awareness, and they got it immediately because I suspect every single one of them has seen it in their communities or in their neighboring county or wherever they are. But when you think about the Russian and China and Iranian, these nation state threats, they don't show up waving their flag. They use covert activities. They obscure and obfuscate their activities as a technique, as a tactic. The ransomware operators don't. They get in there, they get what they want, they lock you up, and they tell you who they are and what they want. And so this pivot allowed us to share a set of resources with them. You can find at cisa.gov/ransomware, and allowed us to really raise awareness of a pernicious threat. Now, the advantage is that if you can defend against a core set of at least what the high-profile ransomware teams are using between Emotet and TrickBot, then you can also probably cover down on a number of the APT techniques and reduce your risk to those exposures because of the availability of malware as a service in this commodity space that we're dealing with. Just the overlap between nation states and cyber criminals is only getting greater. So we were able to cover down on that. We were also able to work with our partners in the intelligence community and elsewhere to share the risks of ransomware to the systems that are out there, including election systems like voter registration database. Voter registration databases are, as I mentioned, were one of the systems targeted in 2016. They're highly connected to the internet. That's how you can look up your registration status. That's how you can send some information in that then subsequently gets put in to the database. We also think about things like Election Act reporting, those systems that update unofficial results to the main headquarters of the election officials and sometimes up to the internet. Again, unofficial, the official data is communicated via a separate channel. But nonetheless, these are systems that could have a significant public confidence impact. If you lost voter reg that we've seen due to whether it's contractor accidents or other hardware failures, that they can knock systems offline at critical times. So we've got to make sure that they're protected. And we have seen the protection and the cybersecurity posture of these systems improve. The Center for Election Innovation and Research issued a report about a month ago. It's a biennial report that compared to their last report 2 years ago, shows that the improvement of deployment of multi-factor authentication, backups, logging of the systems, audits, actual hard copy backups of voter reg has improved over the last 2 years. These are great things. It's about the resilience in the system. Now, a quick sidebar here on why the heck is there so much technology in elections? Well, election officials are focused on really two key things: access to the ballot, access that as many people are able to vote, that want to vote, and can do it in a seamless way, that the voting experience can be as efficient as possible. And the second piece is they really want accuracy, as accurate as possible as counting. So if everything's a human-enabled system, a human-enabled process, manual tabulation of ballots, that both adds time as well as accuracy. I've seen some studies that suggest that human-counted ballots can result in 20% error rates. So technology helps introduce efficiency and accuracies, assuming the technologies are performing as intended and designed, and they're not being manipulated in some system. So with all of this in mind, technology is also being introduced to the system without, in mind that they're not a single point of failure, that a single loss of the system is not catastrophic for the entirety of the process. Yeah, you might lose a system for a few hours, but you can get it back up and running, or there's a workaround. And really, it's just about resilience. It's about failing over into another end state that allows you to conduct the process you're seeking to execute, even though it might take a little bit more work. It might take a little bit more time. So that's the mindset that election officials have. That's the mindset that we have when we think about the cybersecurity of these systems. How do we increase security, but how do we increase resilience and redundancy in the system? A great news story over the last several years is the introduction of analog paper records and paper ballots in the voting process. And so we're not reliant on these systems, these voting machines that you've probably heard of, direct recording equipment, those things that you touch, it counts your vote or registers your vote on removable media, and there's no audit trail or paper-based audit trail. So in 2016, 82% of the votes were cast with those DREs. In 2020, we're on track for better than 92%. In fact, there's only one state left in the United States that has a statewide deployment of DREs. That's Louisiana. There are states like Texas, like Tennessee, Indiana, Kentucky, that have some use of these systems, but the market trends are away from these DREs. I tell you what, if Louisiana had an RFP out that was later protested, where they were going to get rid of the DREs and replace them with machines that produce a paper ballot. And other states did move off those DREs. Pennsylvania, Georgia, South Carolina, they've all got paper records associated with the vote now. New Jersey was one of those states like Louisiana that was planning on using DREs, but because of COVID, they shifted to absentee. So that means now they've got an audit trail. And these, again, are great things. I mean, every single one of you knows that auditability is just a core key tenet of a security process. You've got to be able to go back and check the logs, check the receipts, and build back up and understand where any sort of anomaly may have occurred. That's what a paper record gets you. And so you, when you vote, need to be thinking about it that way. That is your record. That's what you're putting into the system, and they can verify the vote. Okay. So on the security side, in addition to improving the resilience of the process and hardening voter edge, we're seeing improved behaviors in terms of vulnerability management and patching. We offer a series of tools and services, vulnerability assessments, penetration testing. We also have just a regular old vulnerability scanning tool that uses Nessus and Nmap. It allows us to get out there and see the status of these systems. We've deployed a new tool called Crossfeed that's also filling in the gaps here. We're going to keep providing services and capabilities to our partners in state and local election land, as well as the broader state and local election systems, because we know how they're under the gun. We know that they need additional support and assistance. So we're going to keep providing that for them. We've also conducted a series of elections exercises, 4 nationwide exercises over the last several years. We bring all 50 states together to work through a range of scenarios, whether it's cyber, physical, or natural disaster. There are a range of things we can work on together. The last thing I'll talk about here is the partnerships that we've pulled together within the federal government. So up front, I talked about that 50-state election community of practice. We've also had to get our house in order inside the federal government to make sure that we are providing all the support, resources, and the full powers of the national security apparatus in defense of our elections, in support of our state and local election community. Now, I've said this for a while now, that I'm not aware of any other endeavor in cybersecurity in the federal government where you've got such cohesiveness and collaboration, coordination across the various elements of the federal government. And just last week, I heard one of my partners over in the National Security Agency, led by Ann Newberger, her team, a member of her team said the same thing. And it meant a lot to me that we've got this trust built up. Not only do we have trust with our state and local partners, but we have that trust within the federal government that we know that we're doing everything within our respective authorities and powers to do the one thing that's worth doing more than anything else, and that's defending democracy. So I need you, the American voter, to have confidence that you've got the federal team, you've got the state and local team, and you've got our private sector vendors and the social media platforms that are doing everything possible to defend the 2020 election. So that's what brings me to, I think, what will be my closing remarks today. What can you do? What can you do as the American voter? You got 3 things. We call them the 3 Ps. Be a 3P voter. What does that mean? First, be a participating voter. Second, be a prepared voter. And 3, be a patient voter. Participating voter means obviously vote. Get out there and exercise your right to vote. But when you do it, again, remember what I was talking about with that piece of paper, that record of your vote? Check it. Regardless of what style of voting you use, whether it's in-person or mail-based, make sure that you follow the rules and the instructions and the guidance. If you have questions, if you're at home voting from home, pick up the phone and call the voter assistance line. If you are in person, call an election official over and ask for some help. But make sure that you're doing it right. And make sure that whatever you turn in accurately reflects your vote. Make sure that whoever you selected, that's what the thing says. Second, on being a participating voter, make sure that you're getting information from accurate sources. State and local election officials are the authoritative source for information on U.S. elections. In fact, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, dictates that the states determine the time, place, and manner. So if you've got questions about how, when, or where you're supposed to vote, go to your state or local election official. And that takes me to my second P, be a prepared voter. Have a plan. Don't just wake up on November 3rd and think you're going to go vote. Yeah, you probably can, but don't let anybody introduce any questions or doubt into your voting process. Have a plan. Make sure you're registered. Make sure you know where you're going to go vote. Make sure that you are that you have the information you need. But I would say, if you can, vote as early as possible, because that gives us, as the defenders, the opportunity to detect any anomalies in the system. If everything piles up on November 3rd, that doesn't give us a sufficient opportunity to investigate and get on top of issues. So if you can push it to the left a little bit, vote as early as possible, that helps everybody out. Lastly, be a patient voter. And what does that mean? Well, because of the surge in absentee ballots and the mail-in ballots, it may take a little bit more time to crack open the ballots and the envelopes and count them all up. But that's okay, because election day results, November 3rd, results are always unofficial. Every state has a timeline set for certification of the process. It could take a week, it could take several weeks. It depends on each state. But just know that the election officials in your state, they're professionals. Let them count. They're on top of it. They're professional risk managers, and they need time to be able to do their jobs in a professional and responsible manner. So be patient. Let's let them go. I think there are probably 3 states that we're thinking might take a little bit longer, between Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Hopefully their state legislatures will allow for earlier counting, but those are probably 3 states that we're going to need that extra dose of patience for. So with that, I'll close it out now. Thanks again to GrayHat for having me. And remember, you, the American voter, are the last line of defense. Be a participating, prepared, and patient voter, and American voters are going to decide American elections. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. Be safe.